All right, so here we go. Make sure everything's opening here. So just opening up the screen share. Something's not showing up as usual. Let me try that again. Probably got too much stuff open here. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. All right. So welcome to the November 24th meeting. Just kind of a touch base kind of meeting, a few little things to share, some topic stuff to share, questions if you've got to answer. So we'll move right into it. So again, just as always, want to start out with a reminder of people's where you are in your topic cycle and to stay on top of things. And then we'll look at AR topic and AR review, and then next meeting agenda and Q&A if there's any other questions left at the end. So hopefully won't be too long of a meeting, but let's get right into it. So topic status as always, right? Track your expiry date. You are responsible for your expiry date. Do not, as usual, do not save all your topics to be submitted, the night before your expiry date. The last month or so in your cycle, you should have maybe one topic left to finish up. If you're still starting topics in month 8 or 9, it's going to be a problem. So it's your responsibility to stay up on top of those. And if you start to fall behind, you will have to let me know and send me an email to defer topic. So you can no longer, I think they changed this a couple of months ago, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I think I mentioned it at one of our meetings. You can no longer defer topics, only the provider can. So you have to basically let me know which topic you want me to defer. I go into the portal and defer it for you. It's always good if you say, I'm not gonna have enough time to finish this, right? If you can give me a simple reason, I can add that, because it usually, as soon as you click defer, it says, enter Y, right? And so I can put in just ran out of time, lack of resources, whatever it is, just let me know, right? So do track your expiry dates. Do make sure you're preparing your evidence packages as we talked about in our last meeting. Remember, you're allowed 5 uploads. So typically what we'll see, 1 for plan, maybe 2 for due if you need. So that'd be upload 2 and 3. 1 typical package goes for check. And then if you need a 5th one, you can use it for ACT. So that's the best practice for uploading evidence for each topic as well. So again, a lot of you are coming up to expiries, coming up in January, February. So for some, I've seen a few topics trickle in, but for many of you, I've seen nothing yet. For some of you, I have seen not even drafts. So hopefully there will not be surprises, because again, you're responsible for all of that as well. Also, before I forget, note that if you have not paid for this cycle, and your invoice is outstanding, before I go in and submit topics for approval, I'm going to be double checking that. And if we don't have confirmation of payment, we'll ask you to confirm it. If your payment is outstanding, I will not be sending topics for validation. So you have to pay for your cycle in order to participate. And and I'll be holding the topics for sending forward for validation if your payment is outstanding. So if you're not sure if you paid, you should check internally with your accounting folks. If you're still not sure if you paid, then check with Jennifer so that I don't have to flag it at the last minute and say, I don't have confirmation that you paid. I have to hold on to your topics until I get confirmation. So So please make sure you check on that as well. All right. Any questions on track? Staying on track with your cycle and your.
Was in I didn't miss. I didn't miss. I was like, what is happening? But I didn't miss.
Sorry, somebody I think is just not muted. I hear it on the background noise, so I'm gonna mute everybody. If you have a question, just unmute yourself. Okay, you can try again if you were trying, because I just muted everybody, so. All right. Yeah, I'm just checking here. I got a few that already expired and just recently, and a couple of coming up in the next couple of months in February into March and April, some in January. So again, please keep track and get your topics started. Do not save them all to the last minute. All right. So as people are sending in topics and I'm sending them for validation, I always, when I get the confirmation back, as you would for email on the results of the validation, I always go in and I look and I read the reports, especially if it's an AER, and I'll usually send you an email. Do you understand it? Do you have any questions on it? Do you need any help with what you need to be doing? And even if they are complete, I still open it up and have a look, right? So I wanted to share one a report. So they'll always write something, the validators, even if it's complete. So this is an example that of a complete validation result, but with validator recommendations. They call them opportunities for improvements, right? So they usually have, please consider the following opportunity. That's like a standard title, right? And then they'll give you their 2 cents worth for improvement. So this particular topic was ergonomic related for home office, because there are a lot of people now working full-time from a home office environment. And, if you don't have proper setup of your workstation, you're going to end up with ergonomic issues. So that was a controlled hazard topic. Met the basic topic requirements, but the validator had 3 key areas of improvements, right? So the first one was in training, right? Consider providing additional training or resources to everybody, right? Regarding the office ergonomics, some sort of a, training. There's some free stuff. They even gave you the website numbers. Provide suggestions on additional training to consider. Free resources from the Institute of Work and Health, e-office ergonomics, e-learning for office workers. So a little bit more resources. There's tons of stuff out there. So they said, you should, put some stuff together and send it out in addition. So that was a opportunity for improvement under the training. Under control measures, they talk about it says your policy mentions that you should have completed employees workstation evaluation, There's a self-assessment checklist, which was good. So they suggest add additional details on your evaluation checklist to confirm these control measures have been implemented. So it's not good just to have a checklist that identifies yes or no, but for the no's, what was done, and that was missing. So how were the no's addressed? And even on the same form, you can have a spot to record that. So great to have a checklist, but if there are items to be fixed, there's no record of additional, what controls were implemented and by whom and the date. Okay. So there was one, for example, indicated no for having appropriate light for reading or writing documents. So your checklist doesn't clarify if the suggestion action obtain a desktop has been implemented. So there was a recommendation, but no closure. So again, something to consider if you're creating these types of self-assessment type checklists, right? And then in general, for the policy, the validator says, expand it to more than home office, expand the topic to any placements, full-time or office staff, that could work in an office environment, because the hazard can apply to all of them. So broaden the scope of the topic of the hazard, because it applies to anyone who's working in an office environment. Doesn't matter whether home, at a client site, or in your own offices. All right. So gives you, again, it's always good. Make sure you read the reports, even if they're marked complete. It will help you with other topics, but just kind of gives you a flavor of, that what they're recommending. All right. So I thought I'd share this one with you. I don't think it reveals whose it is. I try to be careful with that. I could have probably removed the name for that, but I don't think anybody knows who that is, except for whoever owns this one, which I don't remember. Any questions on opportunity for improvement write-ups from validators?
If we have an opportunity for improvement, are they looking for us to add that before we send it back in? Or if we're okay with it the way it is, like obviously these I would put in, but let's say that no one is working in the office anymore, so the office one wouldn't really apply. So would you still want that to be in there or not?
So when you get, if you look at the title here, when it says complete validation result, means the topic was marked complete. This is not an AER. All right. So there's nothing for you to do except read and take into account the opportunities for improvement. There's nothing further for you to submit on this topic. It was already marked complete. It just has opportunity for improvement. So this is not an AER. There's nothing more to do. All right. So it's up to you to, if you want to take these things and improve the topic that you got completed, but you don't have to resubmit anything. If you get, if you get tagged for an on-site validation, they might want to see, did you do any of this stuff, in response to the improvements, but the topic's already complete based on what you submitted. So really the on-site should focus on verification of what you submitted that was marked complete. All right. Does that answer the question? This is not an AER. Did I answer the question? If you answered, I didn't hear. Let me open up.
Sorry, I thought you could see us. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I just didn't have the, let me just open that chat. Yeah. I just opened the chat, so I don't know.
So all I did was show you a thumbs up and say yes. So.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So with the opportunity for improvement, there's nothing for you to do more on that topic. All right. Good question. Any other questions on something a little bit different than AERs? Sometimes, you'll get excellent, well done, met topic requirements, and there'll be they don't always write an opportunity for improvement. But usually there's one or two things they throw in there. Guess, justify their salary too. All right. Okay, good. And again, I'll keep checking in as topics get validated and share lessons learned from those on regular. All right. So the topics on the topic review list originally generated, a couple of months ago. The next one, they go in hand in hand, and I know some of you did select these. They are controlled documents and control records. So I'm going to do them together, just kind of go over them. Let me stop sharing that and start sharing. go. All right. So the first thing is the member's guide. Give you the topic requirements. So control of documents, and then control records. And I'll go through both of the topic requirements together, and then the sample evidence story and what kind of submission. So the first thing is making sure that you have a good, clear picture of the difference between a document and a record, right? So your documents, and I believe in the write-up, there's examples of what is there a list of some examples here? I just can't remember. No, I don't see here. They might have it under control records. So a document is any policy, procedure you create, guideline, any handbook, handout, posting. These are all documents. All right. A record is typically any form that you create that has been filled in. As soon as it's filled in, it becomes a record. If it's blank, it's technically still a document. So anything you fill in, anything you keep track of, and typically you're going to have a checklists, inspection records, training records, all of these become records. And so these two topics, although similar, focus on different things that you're trying to control, right? And so, you know, they're fairly straightforward topics. They're good, you know, topics to pick because they're not overly complex in their implementation. You know, the amount of training related to these is minimal. In your case, you know, I would say, unless you can think of examples that would apply to your placement workers, most of this is internal, because your workers aren't involved in document control. They fill in records, but they're not responsible for controlling the records. They just fill in records. So there's minimal involvement on these topics from a temporary worker perspective. They focus more on administrative internal office processes. And so you would write a policy for each. Yes, you can put them together, just make them distinct. That, you know, part one, control documents, part one, and, you know, part two is records, or you just leave them separate and address them individually, right? So the expectation here is that you create some sort of a way to make sure that your documents are controlled, the forms that are used, the layout, the templates, everything related to the document, it gets standardized, right? And when you're writing the policy, you know, typical minimum requirements, right? The scope, the objectives, description, right? All the documents and records determined by the business necessary. So they need to incorporate all of those. And again, the focus typically here is going to be health and safety documents. And then how documents are created, how they're collected, how they're retained, distributed, you know, making sure that they comply with legal requirements. And, you know, it addresses even if collective agreements outline this as well. Okay. And then the policy should include how approvals, reviews, tracking, how they're made available to who, how, when, where, right? Making sure that they're clearly legible, right? How you identify documents from a source outside of the business. So they'll look, you know, it's a little section funny. And then how do you prevent unintended use of out-of-date documents? How do you make sure that the most current ones are used and that people aren't using old, outdated versions of documents? Okay. Even a section for special needs be accommodated, such as language, literacy, disability, right? And how your organization is going to do that. Okay. So those would be the minimum content in your write-up of the policy for this. And then again, as I said, records, right? in this case, how records are created, when they're created, how they're controlled from aspect of nobody's able to make changes. And here they give you examples, right? Training records, meeting minutes, that's a record, right? Inspection reports, evaluation, samples, documented interviews, test results, those all become records. Okay, so again, expectation is a policy. And minimum, how the records are maintained, stored, identified, protected, right? From people who are supposed to be reading them, from retrieving them, right? How are they retained, disposed of? What is the record retention policy? How do you keep privacy, especially for things like WSIB related records and confidentiality? And how do you archive them and make sure that they're legible, identifiable, right? And then include a section that says employees have a right to access records relevant to their health and safety while respecting need for confidentiality, right? So that is something that should be addressed in the policy as well. All right. Any questions on the minimum requirements before I switch over to the evidence story samples for each of these, what your PDCA would look like? Okay, I don't hear or see anything in the chat. All right, so your typical PDCA, this is the sample from the samples guide. Again, your plan, just a quick explanation of why you picked it, and what you developed and when it was approved. And then the evidence for a plan will be a copy of the document, the policy, right? The do, so kind of looked at who is responsible for control of documents. That's if it's one or more, they're the ones that were trained, right, on the policy. So in this case, administrative assistant was trained, right? And then more on the communication, or so staff know where documents are found, how they're stored, any of the rules around the documents, right? So there is some communication component. You don't have to have a formal thing. You could do it at a staff meeting, or send out a notice of some sort, just letting know what the criteria is for controlled documents, right? And if you use something like a SharePoint or something, then the employees are trained on SharePoint. Like how do they know how to use the application? So those are all different ways that you would do the do for this, right? And then show, obviously, if there was a little mini presentation, that would be evidence. A record, samples of records of training, that would be evidence. Screenshot, a lot of people screenshot of where you store your records. So like the folders and everything, right? So to show that you have a shared drive, here it is. So that's a common piece of evidence, is a picture of a screenshot where all the health and safety documents are housed. That's your control of records, right? Showing that you have that in place, right? If it's hard copy, then a picture of the hard copy binder. People do that as well to show that this is our master copy, right? And sometimes people will have at least maybe one hard copy. So that would be evidence for due as well. Okay. And then about 8 weeks later, you go back and check, how is it going? Different ways to check this one. Probably easy just to interview workers and see if they understand, they remember. So sample interviews, and some anecdotal narrative in your PDCA. If you happen to do a review of the policy, if it came up for review, that would be as well. nothing too revolutionary for check evaluate. You can do a little evaluation checklist, you know, to check all the different pieces of the policy, and mark it yes, no, right? And then the results of the evaluation should be noted here. And if you had to do any improvements, you would list them in ACT. So if you did interviews for check, that's, you know, the results of those interviews or copies of would be the evidence, transcript, and then improvements if you did, right? So, and again, general sample, like the policy, as we talked about already, the document master list, which would be a screenshot or as well. Training certificates is a little bit overkill for this, but if there is some formal training like on SharePoint or something like that, there might be a certificate, but just a training record, okay? And then either a transcript or interview of employees, right, for the check if you use that option. And very similar for records, right? Again, why you created it, how you created it, and when it was approved as planned. Okay, and then what do? You know, how are you're explaining now that you have this requirement where the, you know, that you digitally store records, where they're kept, training people on where to find them, how to access them. So again, there would be some sort of a communication to those folks responsible for collecting forms that are completed and then making sure they're stored in the right place. Okay. And they talk about record retention here. And then if there is a record training request of record form or something, people want access to a particular record, is there a process for that, especially if it's an employee? So a couple of pieces of implementation there. And then again, the check through random interviews. Are you aware of the procedure, where the records are, you know, supposed to be stored, where to find them, that kind of thing? Okay. And then acknowledgement or improvements. So it's always good to write a note. We thank, you know, our administrator for making sure that documents and records and right? Something like that. So acknowledgement for success, either if there is no other improvements to be made. And then there's your sample of the different types of evidence. So same thing, policy, training record. If people actually did our request form, you can have a sample of one. If you have a special, if you have a filing cabinet, especially for WSIB stuff that's locked and stuff, that's a good piece of evidence to show, you know, confidentiality. So a picture of the cabinet and the lock. And if you have a list, a record master, a list of records that are tracked and maintained, then that would be a good piece of evidence as well. So if you haven't selected the topic, something to put on your to-do list, maybe, you know, these go hand in hand. A lot of people do them together for your next cycle. If you're working on it now, then it gives you a little bit of insight to what hopefully your PDCA looks like and what needs to be included as you go through it. All right, comments, question on those reviews. Again, if you want me to add to the list of topics, let me just see what I just did this. So I've got Injury, illness reporting, and the 3 return to work topics next up on the list for topic reviews. And legal and other requirements is also on that list as well. All right. Any questions on anything to do with the program? Where you're at with your topics? I know I regularly interact either email or phone calls with many of you as you're working through the topics. If you do need a one-on-one meeting to discuss anything, just let me know. We'll schedule it. Not a problem. Just don't schedule it during the Canada. I think the next game Canada's playing on the FIFA, the World Cup is on Sunday, so that shouldn't be a conflict, scheduling conflict. Anything else? All right. So I think we'll probably not meet again till January. There's probably, with the holidays and all that coming up, there's probably not much point in, and there won't be many updates. So probably looking at January for our next meeting, the end of January. We can try the 26th of January, which is a Thursday. If you want to mark that in your calendars, and I'll have Jennifer will send out the invite. Same time, 1 p.m. And we'll again regroup, do kind of a status where things are at. Hopefully by then we'll have some more submissions and topics that have come back, and I can share either opportunities for improvement or AERs with you, and then do topic review. And please, again, if you have any suggestions at all for any topics, anything you want me to review at a meeting, anything you want to hear. I mean, we've already heard from, I think, validators, and we've already heard from different folks. So, but if you want anybody else from the board, I can always ask them to come and do a presentation at our meetings as well. If there's any particular aspect of the program you want to hear from the horse's mouth. All right. Sounds good. Yeah. So this will be our last meeting for the year then, which means happy holidays.